is so good to be here. I do miss seeing people and talking to people. When this is over, if you want to know more about it, then come find me at the booth. And if not, come and talk to Hervé about Maven Central or Maven. We have some Sonotype people there. And as was beginning, it's like, go talk to the vendors, because you should see part of what this is about is all about learning. So this is the title. We've all met them, right? We've all met these wonderful people who just do everything, you know, fix more code, fix more PRs, much more opinionated, just get stuff done, okay? You know, they do it all, you know, they're those superheroes, yeah? We probably all, well, we think we've met one, because they could do all this fantastic stuff, you know? And it would be great. Wouldn't it be great to be there like that? One of those, 10x developer. You've all heard the term, I take it. It's one of the things you can Google for. And if you Google for it, then what you actually get back is a lot of people going, so what is a 10x developer? And it's got weird connotations. Is it somebody who writes 10 times the lines of code that you do? Do they fix 10 times the bugs? Do they work 800 hours a week? Well, sometimes the first two might be not really true, but the last one, not 800 hours a week, but you do find these 10x developers who just put in loads of hours, so that's not the best. And they tend to have some sort of weird secret identity, you know. I only work alone. Those opinionated developers, others hold me back. So that's not really the best role model. Right? And then they go, oh, I just did this stuff. I rewrote the back end. I did this, right? So when we talk about 10x, you have to be clear that actually 10x can often mean bad behavior, non-optimal behavior, right? Now, I've been around a long time. You can tell by the lack of hair and the grayness, though there isn't much hair to be gray, right? And this is my bio, right? But I've done all this stuff. I've been doing Java forever, right? And I've done Java, I've done JVMs, I've worked in Apache, I've done Eclipse, I've done all these things. I've worked in other projects, I've worked in real-time stuff, I've done operating systems, so I've done loads because I've had the chance to do so. And you know, in all that time, the number of 10x developers that I have met, right, tiny fraction. And in fact, not all of them were developers, because the people that empower us aren't just developers, they can be testers as well. There's also always somebody who exhibits the right behavior, right? And the most important thing is none of them were superheroes. None of these people had those weird characteristics. But they were all professionals. So when we talk about 10x developers, let's not talk about 10x, let's talk about professional developers. Let's talk about what it means to be a professional developer. And I've got smatterings of 10x through here, but think about it not so much as this mythical superhero thing, but think about you as the job that you do. Right? You're at a conference, you're here to learn. So the thing to think about is, how do you learn? What do you learn? What should you get out of this conference? Right? Now, I'm not going to tell you what you should go specifically learn, but maybe this will give you some hints as to maybe the sorts of things you want. So being a developer takes time, right? You don't get it overnight. It is a process. It's a journey, right? You start here by ignoring those role models that you think might be cool. Hey, we did overnight coding. Right? If you're ever in a company that says, we're going to work overnight, that is a bad sign. And if they say to you, working overnight, you know, often, that's a very bad sign, run away. Occasionally it's needed. You need more people who think like the cartoon on the right. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for consideration, you're looking for thought, right? And 10x developers are very methodical. Professional developers are very methodical in what they do. So here's an example of some ways they think, right? A set of steps. So one thing you'll get from this is quite often you'll meet people and they go, quite often, what am I saying? Occasionally when you meet one of these people, they will tell you this, that everything goes in Git. I put everything in Git, and I commit, and I have a record of everything I did during the day. All the notes I made and everything goes in Git, because I can always roll back, and I can always find things, and I can roll forward if I make mistakes. And that becomes a common thing, this idea of keeping track of what you do. And then, surprisingly, quite a few of them, they have their own little CI/CD system. Because why build stuff on your desk when you can have another machine do it? If you want, and get a bigger machine, get it to do things. And figure out how to do those things reliably. Because part of a professional developer's role is to understand all the tools that they use. Right? But they don't go big time, never go big time. It's always about just enough to get the job done. And then they'll go and explore something. They haven't even written any code yet, but they're going to go learn. And that's what you should do. You go learn. You go just see how it works. Figure out how to get the simplest thing done before you try anything more complicated. And then when you've got something up and running, you break it. Because you want to know how the diagnostic works. And if you've deployed something to a cloud, for instance, don't sit the right application, deploy cloud. First thing, write something simple, deploy it to the cloud, and then break it. It'll probably break anyway. But go figure out how the diagnostics work. Because if you don't do that now, when you have time, you'll do it later on when you don't have time and things are much more complicated. And then you learn about what you're going to use. Professional developers understand the tools they use deeply. They don't use loads of tools unless they have to, but the tools they use, they know really well, right? And they kick tires, they make a session. They write tests to check your assumptions. If you use something and it says, this is what we do, you might want to write a test to prove it, rather than just assume it. And you read the fine print, because we're all good at doing the Stack Overflow stuff, and just doing whatever anybody else says. And then you get around to doing the code, right? This is a picture of a jelly mold, and I'm going to touch on this in a second. But there's one superpower, I would say, separates the professional developer from everybody else, and that professional developers understand that code is not the thing. It's the value it offers. You write code, code is going to evaporate, it's going to become old. But tests that test the value, they are really useful. There we go, I've just said this. But basically, if you have tests, you can change code because your tests will catch that you've changed behavior. If you have no tests, you can't figure that out. So you can't do the things that you really want to do because you have no way of demonstrating to yourself that that works, right? So 10x developers are more Duke on rocket surfboards than fighting dragons, right? They're more Ironman than Superman. They may be powerful, but they got there by building the systems, the kit they needed to do the job. So a lot of words here, but if you think about what they do, it's how they think. It's high quality, value on time, just what's necessary. We don't do loads of things just because it might be useful, because we're being paid to deliver value. Right? And it's not the code you write, it's the success that other people get. If you write loads of code and it never offers any value, then what was the point? You just make things harder. Right? And understanding that it's not just you, it's the team. So professional developers are very interested in helping development teams move forward because this is a team sport. It's not just you. You may be writing code, you may have a QA, you may have somebody who's looking after your cloud infrastructure. Whatever it is, you're in it together. So you have to be part of the team. And in fact, if you help the team get better, then you get better too. So this is hard, there's no doubt about it. We all struggle with all these elements. How do we make this happen, right? Well, there are some guidelines, okay? As in, hey, skills over Stack Overflow. Choose knowledge over hearsay. Right? Teamwork over tantrums. I like that one. Because we know what it's like. You meet people and they're just really, no, I don't want to do that. And they can't justify it. And you end up doing things because your team's not working. Right? But facts and evidence and working code are much more important. And that's what you focus on. You focus on how do I get the least I need for those things. Getting that balance right is hard, right? There's no silver bullets here other than the way that you think. So you have to understand that if you have a system, rocking the boat, big changes, bad thing. Don't do that. Figure out how you do something small. Small wins. Small wins all the time. The thing you'll see about very good developers, I use developers to cover all the professions we talk about, is their clarity of purpose in discussion, in coding, in setup. We're just trying to do this. And this whole you're not going to need it conversation, okay, they understand what you're going to need, and that's what you get. Because it's all about delivering value. Right? And whatever the next thing is whatever the next thing is. So it might be writing code. It might be fixing a bug. It's like what moves us forward, and that's their focus and clarity. That's always the conversation. And this means they're productive. Because all of this mentality, this approach means you're prepared to take risk. That doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to take a risk. It's actually, if I'm jumping off a bridge, I've got a bungee cord attached to me. I'm prepared. So it's this thinking ahead. Are you sure this is going to work? What can I do to mitigate the risk? What can I do to get evidence and facts to prove that what we're going to do is going to be useful and successful? Right? Because every time you add risk into the system, things break. So you don't deliver value. And the way they think about development is just different. Right? As I said, mostly you talk to developers, these professional developers, the ones I've met, and code is important, but code is always the end goal. Right? It's the enabler to something bigger. Right? Which is why I talk about testing as being a really good example. This idea of code and tests. Right? They're not slavishly people who go after code coverage, because that's not optimal either. We know that writing lots of test code coverage for getter and setter methods is not particularly useful, so they don't do those things. But they do understand that having sufficient tests means they can be bold and they can take risks. Because your test suites enable you to refactor, to be ruthlessly refactoring. Chuck the code away that doesn't work. You've got it in Git if you need to bring it back. You have tests to prove whether you've broken things. You can be more productive with those sorts of safety nets. And the way this pans out, the way this thinking can affect the way that your organization works. I'm going to show you something now that a 10x tester showed me way, way back. And when I learned it, and it was like, yeah, this makes perfect sense, but it had to be explained to me. So when you look at testing, quite often you have groups of people who do testing. You might be a developer doing implementation tests or unit tests, and you might have integration tests and quality tests and whatever. And it's this siloed view of, well, you do this and you do this and you do this. And there's some sort of sense of what those tests are supposed to be like and what they're for. But there's no separation is by role, not by what the test does. And what was explained to me was that you should think it differently. You should think about, how long does a test take to run? A long time, or is it really quick? How much domain knowledge do you need? How much setup do you need? Do you need it easy? Can I just do it on my part of the build process? Do I need setup? And the optimal balance is to take all the things that are easy to run and require the least amount of knowledge down to the corner where the developers run. Because you want, as a developer, you want every single test that you can lay your hands on that you can run quickly and easily. And then every time that it becomes slightly harder or takes longer, you back off, you take a risk assessment and you go, we'll run that less often and maybe somebody else runs it. That thinking about why we do what we do is what you would expect professional developers to look at the way you do development and say, we're not achieving what we should because we have role models and we have structure, and it's like, does that work? That's just one example. Right? Because a lot of this is about feedback. How can you get better? How do you know what risks you're taking? How can you improve if people don't have feedback? So professional developers are 10Xers. Feedback everywhere. Everything we do tells me something, gives me evidence about what's going on. Everything. Because without it, all it is hearsay, and you can't take actions from that. Right? Actionable intelligence is what everybody's looking for. I know that it's broken, I know why it's broken, I know how it's broken, and I can fix it. If all I get is I get 50,000 tests failed, that's not very actionable, is it? And that's what it's all about. How do I do things? So that means, as a developer, not just how do I get my test team to do that. As a developer, how do I build my product? How do I instrument it? How do I put stuff in so that I can get information out? And that is part of the process too. Including things like how you handle issues. Issues, for some organizations, issues become sacrosanct. If it gets raised and we think it might be a problem, we'll leave it on the list. But it becomes noise and it distracts you. And then you find that this issue that somebody raised isn't a real bug, or it's been raised and now it's out of date, and you have all that stuff. So one other thing that professional developers are good at are pushing back on the backlog and saying, yep or no. Because to be honest, a lot of this stuff is going to be, well, I'm changing the code, so it may not be valid anymore. But what do? Do you keep having these loops of long conversations with people? You do for the important things, for the now. But if somebody goes, well, occasionally it breaks, what do? You make a risk assessment. And sometimes you go, we'll just close it. Because there are more important things to do, and it's just noise. And if it's really bad, they'll come back. And of course, a lot of the time you get issues which have questionable information in them. Right? If you find as a developer that you have somebody raising tests who gives you very good, clean information, cherish them and grow them and help them teach the other parts of their organization to do the same. Because clarity in issues saves your life. So all this feedback, this process of talking to people, which you need to get the process to work so that you can do your job, has a bunch of positive effects, right? Because it starts to bring people together. It's a team job we're in. We're professional developers working in a group. And so having these conversations, having this conversation about feedback and measurements and what works and how we identify things are working or not working, brings you all together to making focused, evidence-driven decisions, which is what 10X developers want to do. But there's more than that. It isn't just about what they want to do with teams. 10X developers are very opinionated, but in a soft way. And the most obvious thing that I can tell you that I've seen different is they build their own developer experience. Right? I don't mind what your developer experience is. You use whatever IDEs and tools and things you want. Right? If you have a really complicated life, this is a 10X developer's life. It's a roadmap. This is what I focus on, just the tools I need to know. Right? I'll tell you this. A professional developer can tell you the difference between why you should use wget or why you should use curl. And I bet almost nobody in this room could answer that question. Because when professional developers use tools, they learn what the tools are capable of. Right? Right? They're craftspeople. This is what you do. It's a tool. It's the hammer. You're going to go and learn the tools that you have. You're going to read the manual. You're going to print out the help. And you're going to look at what it does. Because 10X developers don't say this. I thought I was using the tool correctly. I didn't realize what the default setting was, or I trusted the tool to do the right thing. These are real quotes from some cause analysis things that I have access to. Right. That's not good, is it? So, being the great developer is definitely more like thinking like Ironman, about building the tool suite and knowing how it works. You don't want to be in a suit of iron, fly around the sky, and then have a blue screen of death. No. You want to know how that works inside out. And you can't afford to know everything, so you have to be focused. Right. But it's also about this. It's about you being a team player. It's about you being a mentor and educator, because that's what helps other people be successful. And if they're successful in their job, then you can do your job better. So I have some rules. Rule 1, a great developer delivers high quality code on time that only does what is necessary. Every time you're tempted to do I'll put this in now because we might need it later, have a think again. Sometimes you're right, but quite often it's just our imagination. Developers strive to replace uncertainty with facts. Don't have conversations with hearsay. Go, how do I know that's true? Prove it to yourself, to your colleagues. Go read, go trial, go prove. Don't make assertions. I think. Just go prove it. And this incremental value, you will get more value, more deliverable, more fun by having things work all the time, delivering value step by step. What size of step is up to you, but if it's too big, then things cease to function. But it is important focus to understand that you don't do everything at once, you do small pieces and you move forward. Right? You're a professional team player. Can't stress that enough. We do not want professionals who do I worked overnight and I rewrote things. Right? We do have them, but that's not really good. A professional developer, all of you, I hope, when you've finished here, you're going to go home. Maybe you'll be able to do work, but you don't spend every hour of your waking day working on code, because that's not good either. Right? Oh, and lastly, number 5, know when to break all these rules, because you're in control. You know what risks to take, because you have the facts and the evidence to make those assessments. If you don't have those facts and those assessments and that data, you can't do a good job. And you don't know whether what you're doing now is a good thing or a bad thing, because you haven't got the basis and you're not driving yourself to have that skill and experience. So my takeaway for you is, apart from thank you for coming to Vox Days, is go away, go talk to the vendors at the booth, go learn something new from them. Right? And all the sessions that are in today, look for what they teach you about the tools you know. Look for information about the wider space that we live in. What is it that's new? Because that may be something you need to go research. Right? And also look at what you can do to take back to the people you work with who aren't here, that maybe could help their job. So don't be completely selfish and have a great time for yourself. Take some cool stuff back with you. And that's it. Thank you very much.